This program is rated PG. Parental guidance. Due to content that may not be suitable for children, parental accompaniment is advised.
Unless you've been living behind the moon for the last few weeks, you'll have noticed that the Russian Federation and Ukraine are at war as we speak. This war is bringing great international tensions at the moment. The European Union and the United States are in the process of imposing more sanctions on Russia, while Russia's foreign minister has said that Russia is not at war with Ukraine. Attempts by Turkey to mediate this week have been unsuccessful so far. The United Nations now estimates that some 2 million refugees have left Ukraine to seek shelter because of the fighting. Among these are not at least also some furries. The GFTV editorial team managed to locate one of them. Severyn is actually a 16-year-old student interested in science and acting. His plans for the future, however, were thrown off course by the war. In this episode of Furterviewing Furs, we present you our conversation with him in which he talks about his experiences and the furry culture in Ukraine. My name is Nylo, I'm your show host. Nice to have you with us. Okay, we are live. Welcome, Severyn, to the show. How are you?
I'm pretty fine right now, being in Poland as a refugee at my friend's house.
So you managed to get out of Ukraine as a refugee in Poland. We will get back to this later in the conversation. Just as a really start for me and the listeners of our episode today, how are you personally right now dealing with the situation that your country is at war? I can only imagine that's gotta be a lot to cope with.
Well, yes, that is emotionally very hard to cope with because many things that we were used to, for example, the sound of planes in the sky now seems really hostile because in those 8 days that I spent in Ukraine, every warcraft was a military warcraft, so any bangs with doors, any stomps, claps really freak me out right now because, well, my mind got used that those are the signs of danger. Many of my friends managed to get in safer places because the really dangerous zone right now is the eastern Ukraine, because with the border with Russia and also with the border of Belarus, because as you know, they both are in the conflict right now.
Yes, very much so. You told me beforehand that you lived in Kiev before you fled to Poland. What did you do before the war broke out? What was your life before that?
I was living in Kiev, in the city, but later, when I was around 14, we moved to our summer house and started living there because we needed to finish another house that was near the same street, actually, so we can live there. And pretty much I was writing music, learning how to act because my dad is an actor and I also planned to become an actor. I was into STEM, so physics, chemistry, some engineering. I was trying to self-develop myself because when quarantine broke out, I ended up being isolated pretty much, and I had a lot of free time, and Just spend it on learning new things, on discovering some stuff.
And this was this the part where you found out that the furry fandom existed?
Yes, my friend introduced me to that because before that I was really into anime, even though I didn't have pretty much time to watch it because I was still learning Kiev, but living outside of the city. So I spent like 2 hours in the car going from one place to another. But I just kept telling my friend how much I enjoy Nekos and all those other characters that look like animals. And he asked me like, if you enjoy anthropomorphic characters this much, why won't you look onto furries? And I was like, who are those furries? And that way I got introduced to the fandom. I was on Discord at the time, so yeah, I was just browsing different Discord servers, finding new people, and eventually even got into a big D&D like roleplay server.
So that means that you entered our culture, our fandom, in a very difficult time when we already had a pandemic. That means you are in our fandom for about 2 years now, something like that.
Yes.
And since you entered the our culture in a very difficult time, what personally to you does being a furry mean?
Furries, unlike any other fandoms I ever met or was a part in, are really supportive and communicative because I had actually no one to talk to because I just moved, and of course I didn't knew anyone there, and I was feeling really lonely. And furries from Discord and Reddit really helped me with that. I found many good friends that I am in touch even to this day because we were just talking when quarantine was on live. So furry fandom really means supportiveness for me because I was supporting people, they were supporting me. Furries are really wholesome fandom. They are also very upbeat, very optimistic, and those are the kind of people that will help you even at the hardest time.
That's nice to hear. So how do we have to imagine this? Is there a notable branch of the furry fandom in Ukraine? Are there like many furries or not so much? What does the furry fandom in Ukraine look like? Or what did it look like?
It is growing, I must say. It wasn't really big before quarantine started, but when people went to talk to people online more, they found out that other furries also exist, and it started to grow rapidly. I know many furries in Ukraine, and unlike Western furries, we don't have big meetings. We have actually one FurCon, actually to one in city of Lviv and other in Kiev. But actually, furries just find each other in cities where they live and they just meet. So, like, they can write in a Telegram group, just ask, like, hey, who's in Kiev? Let's meet there or there. And they just meet. So, we don't have big FurCons. Instead, we have small, like, local meetings.
And you mentioned Kiev. How is being a furry regarded in in Ukraine, in your region, in Kiev? What do people think about this? How do they respond to fursuits and art of furries, if they respond after all?
Most people find it like just another hobby, so they don't respond as much. Some, of course, uh, respond negatively because of stereotypes and stuff. Others are interested, like, who are those furries? They never heard of that term, and eventually they even sometimes get into the fandom. So even though Eastern and Western Europe are usually seen as a pretty hostile environment for furries, Ukrainian people are usually coping with furries pretty well, so they don't mind them. But yeah, they like them, so we don't have such hate as it is imagined.
Speaking about Western and Eastern Europe, did you, in your time in our furry culture, ever notice some kind of a difference between Western and Eastern furries? Maybe misconceptions about each other, or are we all the same in your regard?
Well, as I said, Ukrainian furry fandom is only starting, it's growing, developing, and unlike Western furries, we don't have that much of fur-sets. So usually when people meet, they meet in their regular clothes just because they don't have sewers or they don't have money to buy or sew a fursuit. And so a wide misconceptions about Western furries is that we think that American furries are really, really wealthy.
Okay, interesting. Is there still any connection to the Russian part of the furry fandom, or is that completely gone now? Do you still have any connection to Russian furries, or did you ever have a connection?
Well, I must also mention that Ukrainian furries are extremely patriotic because, like, we understand that our country isn't in the best shape and we really, really want to work to make our land better. And I mentioned that I was in a D&D like server. It was actually a Russian server, and well, Russian furries are pretty hostile. I must admit that among all furries I ever met, Russian furries got to be the most toxic, the most annoying, and the most aggressive ones. And after the war started, they were completely brainwashed by propaganda because, well, when I told my friends from there that a missile landed 1 kilometer away from me, they said that we don't believe you, that's fake. The Russians never bombed other cities and stuff. So, no, every furry, Ukrainian furry that had connection with Russian and Belarusian furries, they are now completely broken because Russian furries are pretty hostile towards Ukraine and usually even refer to Ukraine as a part of Russia.
Really? Okay, so what would you say how they feel about the war then?
There are very few that are sorry for what happened. There's a big part that believe that everyone in Ukraine is neo-Nazi and we are bombing ourselves to blame Russia. And the biggest part of those Russian furries, they just don't care. They even try not to mention, and many Russian servers even have rules not to mention about Ukrainian conflict. So
Okay.
I guess like half of Russian furries, they just don't care.
See, I've very few contacts into the Russian part of our fandom myself, and what I heard from them or from my contacts was that they really felt horrible about the war. It's interesting how opinions can vary from different contacts. Uh, do you think then that this war will come with a lasting division between the Russian part of the fandom of the furry culture and the rest of the world and the furry culture, or not?
I think it will, because there's a popular phrase among Russian furries that the people of Russia, they're not guilty. Like, they're not the government. They can do nothing, but uh, they paid the taxes, and those taxes went to make tanks, and most of them don't even bother to go on meetings, not even saying that they're ain't making anything more radical than just meetings. So many of them doesn't even bother to go on their local square, on their central street, and just stand there against the war.
I see. So let's get back to the situation you're in right now. You mentioned that you fled to Poland, are staying with a friend right now, and what I'm really interested is how did you actually learn shortly before all that? How did you actually learn that an actual war has started in your country? How was that for you?
I was pretty unlucky to live less than a kilometer, around 600 meters from a military base, and right at 5 a.m., two large ballistic missiles landed there. So I knew there was a war at the very moment when it started. So before any land and water units were moving towards Ukraine on their land, there was a large ballistic missile attack on all communicative, all military centers, and we didn't have much of a shelter, so me and my family were hiding under the stairs because that was the safest place we had in our house.
I can only imagine how that must have been. I am certain I would have been frightened for my life. What kind of moment was that for you?
Well, everyone was really scared and didn't know what to do, because we hoped that that was just a ballistic missile attack, that no troops will move. Actually, first news came from Telegram, because the biggest like network of Ukrainian news is in Telegram, because when there is such a situation, you need to know news very operatively, because if you go from the country, you need to know where you should go, so you don't you don't happen to be in the middle of the fight. Actually, everyone was just threatened and waiting, because there was actually just a feeling of hopelessness, because what can you do against a missile? You can just hide and wait until something gets clearer.
And what happened next after that very first moment of the war?
Shortly after, we got news that it is a real war, so not just a ballistic strike, and we started to plan our actions. Firstly, we thought that we need to go out of the country, but we realized that right now it is very dangerous and the borders will be heavily loaded, many cars will be there. So we decided that we just must wait. We need to take all we need, so when there will be a possibility, we will flee from the country really fast. Later, the next day, we stayed under the stairs almost all day. Later next day, my father went to a local territory defense point and he was just asking, do they need anything like medication, some other stuff like instruments or maybe some electronics. And I was feeling really guilty that I'm not old enough, neither I am experienced enough to help any one of them. And Ukrainian Furries, they're like most half of them is into STEM, and because of Furries I knew, I got into cyber partisan movement pretty quickly. So there was a lot of people and Furries also that were DDoSing Russian sites, so they don't have quite as much communication.
So you, since you are not in the army, are trying with other furries actually together, trying to get into the way of the Russian military in whatever way you can, basically, from where you are.
We were DDoSing banks, we were DDoSing government websites, we were DDoSing their main browsers, so Yandex. We were DDoSing actually everything that we thought that will be important for them, especially bus and airplane tickets before the sanctions was implemented on them.
Okay, so everyone is trying to do their little part, even if they're not in the military.
Yes, entire Ukrainian nation is. I think the best explanation is that literally everyone is militarized, not because they're forced to, just because they want. Even the people that are abroad, they're doing everything they can to protect our land.
See, how did you then actually get into Poland and out of Ukraine?
After a few days of the war, Russians started to attack civil points, so hospitals, schools, kindergartens, and also bridges and roads. And we quickly realized that Ukraine consists of two banks. So there's Dnipro in the center, and obviously the only way to get from one bank to another is with bridges, because the railway stations were really loaded. Of course, there was no flights, and we decided that we need to leave our home when there was only one bridge left. So we really didn't want to, but it was such a requirement for our safety. And we spent 4 days in the roads, and on last day our dad left us to stay in Ukraine. I really wanted to stay with him to volunteer for other people for the territorial defense, but he decided that I need to be in a safer place.
And then you went into Poland to a friend that you have there.
Yes, his last words to me were, "You are everything that I ever had in my life."
Do you have still contact to your father?
Yes, I do. We try to make calls as frequently as we can. So yes, we still are in touch. But of course, me and my mom really miss him.
Of course. And in all of this, in this entire situation that is really completely a mess, does the furry culture at all have any role in your life right now, or is this completely in the background? I mean, you would have, you can, of course, you have a lot of other stuff that you have to worry about right now.
Well, honestly, I have a really strong connection with furry community right now, because all the most supportive people I right now have, my friends, my boyfriend, all of them are furries, and also many cyber partisans that I know, they are also furries. So even though I'm not directly in the furry community, like talking about furry stuff, arts, and so on, I'm still in there because a lot of people I know are furries.
So, and you're in Poland now, and do you feel safe now?
Well, yes, but still, it's pretty unnerving to hear civil planes because you know I perceive them as military. But yes, and now I feel much safer and trying to return to everyday life. Right before our call, I went to the local school to see can I get in there, and yes, I can.
Is this what you will do next? Or I mean, or how do you even go about your life now? How do you even make plans now? Or I mean, what do you keep yourself busy with?
Well, right now, I think that I will just wait, trying to develop some skills because all plans that I ever had in my life were in Ukraine. So I wanted to act in Ukraine. I wanted to write and play music in Ukraine. So actually, we just wait because we want to return to Ukraine as fast as possible. So we are just waiting when the war will end.
These were, I mean, first of all, thank you, Severyn, for these deep insights into what has happened to you and your current situation. Is there, at the end, anything that you would like to tell the listeners of today's episode, or anything that comes into your mind?
Don't stop talking about Ukraine. Don't stop talking about the war because as soon as you forget about Ukraine and everyone stops supporting us, we're doomed.
Thanks so much for your time and the insights, Severin. Thank you very much.